Here we're at a new border, and you say it's been roughly about a year or maybe a bit more?
So it is a blank border every year.
Blank border every year?
Yeah, so there's nothing sort of permanent in here. The first year I did nasturtiums on teepees with pumpkins around the base. The second year it was dahlias and snapdragons and sunflowers that got 14 foot tall. I was trying to create sort of a tiered effect.
Yes.
And then it was dahlias here and sunflowers there, which was quite funny, but it was such a joy. It was so bright and colourful, very tropical border. And this year I've got my like sort of little mini farm thing going on. So I've tried to grow corn for 4 years, and it's never been successful. The seedlings have always died in the tray.
Right, but this year,
fingers crossed,
we have success.
And it's really interesting. So this actually isn't sweet corn; it's popcorn.
Right. Okay.
And I learned that there's actually 3 different varieties of corn. It's maize, there's sweet corn, and then there's popcorn. So I'm hoping, can you imagine if I can just take, my daughters love popcorn, if I can just bring in popcorn.
Maybe that
That would be so fun. And then we've got self-seeded nasturtiums in there.
Yes.
And I moved an artichoke and I thought it hadn't survived, and now it's cropped up in between my sweet corn on my popcorn. So, but that's fine.
Yeah,
and
just
then,
leaving it be.
Yeah, and then we've got some random gladioli that have popped up there, and pumpkins, which seem to be doing quite well because I think they've just got that boost from that lovely hot spell that we had, but they've slowed down now. So fingers crossed that we get some pumpkins this year. And then wherever the nasturtiums are popping up.
Yeah, I'm looking around, I'm seeing those beautiful kind of like leaf structures everywhere. There's kind of little pops.
And I love this variety. I think it's called Emperor's Queen.
Right.
And it's sort of that purpley, dusky colour again. It's not like a really bright nasturtium. And then we have dahlias that I actually thought had died because we had that -15 snap and I hadn't lifted anything in time. And it sort of was that prolonged spell. And I did like dig around in the soil and I found a couple of rotted ones. I thought, oh no, I've lost all my dahlias. But some of them
have come back.
So they're hardier than I think, than we think. So I've just let them crack on. And then I've got, I think that is a butternut. And butternut doesn't do well for me.
Okay.
It really doesn't. I always get powdery mildew. I've actually already taken one out that was just not thriving. And then we have Crown Prince and Festival. So I grow some smaller ones and then I try and grow some nice Crown Prince, some Cinderella pumpkins. And then we've got beans, different types of beans, purple podded, French beans. I can see the nasturtium flowering there. And then I grew some oxeye daisies from seed. I planted them out quite late, so they're still quite small.
And is this like a kind of like a storage patch, or is that where they're going to live?
I don't know. I have no idea, but I have some there that just randomly appeared. I didn't plant those, or the red campion, and it's such a lovely entrance into this area because it's a little bit more whimsical. And I just feel like it would pull up the colour again if they popped up here. And as you can see, we've moved from a formal area to something that's a little bit more whimsical. And then as we get to the fence here, it's just wild.
Yeah, because as I'm like walking through and I'm listening to the sound crunching underfoot of the bark, and I'm seeing that we've got this curved pathway. Which, and they do say that make your path curved unless it's really going somewhere. It doesn't need to be direct. And it's lined again by the stones, which are from the local landscape as well, which I think is really good because that is tying in all the areas and just kind of reminding us that this is one landscape and that we can have different rooms, like you said before. Yeah,
I think that was the one thing when we moved in that we knew we wanted when we started our sort of proper gardening journey, because the garden is quite large and it can feel quite overwhelming, but if you tackle it in sort of room spaces, it just brings everything down and it just creates a sort of different vision. So it's fun to just have a blank canvas every year with this border, which is south-facing. And it's quite protected by these wild sort of raspberries that were here when we moved in. And this whole area is wild. I mean, it's cow parsley and grasses and foxgloves and creeping buttercup ranunculus here that's one of my bugbears, but we'll let it be there. And then there's sort of ground elder. And, but it's just, we'll keep the wild. That's the balance. And
keep the wild, absolutely.
Grow something that's sort of useful. And
I'm kind of looking up there and we're keeping the wild. Also, there's that future project?
Yeah, I would love to create a secret garden. We actually did start that project. We started it and then we sort of scaled back a bit because we were taking on quite a lot. And I just want to have more time to sort of dedicate to it. So we thought we'll just let it go wild. But I'd love a secret garden. I'd love running water up here in some shape or form, just to have that sound in the background. But I said to you, I also want chickens.
Yes.
So I think it'll be a great spot for a coop.
Yeah.
But I'm still doing my research, and I think I've convinced my husband to have chickens, which is quite nice.
Job done.
Yeah.
We're talking about the sounds, and because you mentioned running water, which I'm a big fan of, but even with the chickens, with the sounds that they make, they're kind of like clicking off that. And I'm a really big believer in soundscapes and like creating so not just a visual feast within the garden, but having that kind of acoustically, having that layering of sound, I think is really valuable and something that we can do quite freely within the garden by adding those different things. It's not just the rustling of the trees or the sheep or the birds like flittering by. I can add in all those different textures.
It's the bark underfoot or the gravel or the...
Exactly. I think there's so many different things for the senses, which then again, as I've spoken about before, it's like really works to our soul and really helps us kind of feel that connection because we are feeling it. We're like processing it and taking it all in.
So
then we're taking this emotional kind of connection there and we're really registering it. And when we just take the time to register it.
Yeah, and look up and just and soak it all in. Yeah, that's something that it's been a massive change sort of in my environment since moving here. I was very much behind the laptop person for probably over a decade, and I just didn't take the time to sort of look up and see what was going on around me. And I think as soon as you do that, everything slows down and you don't feel like you're going at 100 miles per hour anymore. And I feel like especially in sort of what I call our woodland walkway, where it's mature trees, and when you get that sound of the wind rustling through them, it's just heavenly. It's
and it can give us that time and that perspective, and can allow us to see clearer in other parts of our life as well, different aspects of our life. It just gives us that time to kind of negotiate all those feelings, and then we can kind of take that forward, having had time to think and kind of breathe.
And unwind a bit, it's very, very true.
Diana, they say that the garden is another room to the house, but here in fact you've added several rooms to your house, and it's really quite incredible just the time spent here, being in each space, having that different feeling, the absolute serenity, being within the landscape. And I feel like all my senses are kind of really like heightened after the time spent with you, having, hearing all the wildlife and the visual, acoustic, and just how I feel in general is brilliant. And I just think, even just looking around now, and I'm seeing your potager garden and your bare root hedging coming up, that it's just been such a privilege. So thank you ever so much.
Oh, thank you so much for coming out. It's been wonderful to meet you and to chat about my garden. One of my favourite things to do. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again.
I'd love to see that where you are in a couple of years' time with these borders in particular and these areas, and then where you are with your pond, and see how the garden's evolved, and how to hear from yourself to see how you've evolved in your garden as well, because it's such a personal relationship and an expression of oneself as well. So I think it's going to be of what has been so far, a really beautiful journey, and one that's going to continue and just flourish so exquisitely.
I hope so.
So thank you ever so much.
Oh, thank you.